How long will we be on?
Good evening, and welcome to BlackDoctor.org. I am Ellis Dean, a senior project manager with BlackDoctor.org, and we are excited to have this conversation tonight. We have a special guest, Dr. Richard Allen Williams, and we're going to talk about his new book, which is called Blacks in Medicine. And just going to give you a brief synopsis of the book, and we're going to get right into it. It's a new book written by Dr. Williams that specifically addresses the issues of social justice, diversity, healthcare disparities, clinical deficiencies, institutional and implicit racism, police violence, the opioid crisis as a public health problem, and the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on communities of colors in a manner that no other book does. This blockbuster book covers 5,000 years of Black medical experience. It is an essential resource for anyone involved or interested in the racist, dysfunctional system that is American medicine. So that is an explosive description there, Dr. Williams. I guess my first question is, what prompted you to write this book?
I wrote the book, first of all, because of the necessity of providing information about Blacks in medicine and about our particular experience, our unique experience. Our experience in medicine in all phases is something that is completely different from anybody else's experiences. Other ethnic and racial groups have had their own experiences, certainly, but nothing has been like the experiences that Blacks have had in medicine. So I felt that it was necessary to let people know what it is that we have gone through over the past 5,000 years. And I want to point out the fact that there is a lot of historical information that is provided in this unusual book. It's unusual not just because of the fact that I wrote it, but because of the subject matter. These are things that have been written about in pieces before, but never in one solid tome, which somebody can pick up and learn all about what we're all about medically.
Absolutely. 5,000 years, that's a long time. How did you get the information from that far ago? Or are you relying more on historical data and history books, or how did you pull that information from that far back?
Well, I've been a student of Blacks in medicine for most of my professional life, which goes back about 60 years. And I'm very proud to say that I've done the work to bring all of this to the attention of the public. I've done the background research, the heavy lifting that's necessary to dig down into all of the cryptic information, which does indeed go back 5,000 years. And that beginning point was in Imhotep, with Imhotep, who was the god of medicine in ancient Egypt, back in the 5th dynasty BC. And we come forward from there. Imhotep was a Black man in Egypt who was the first doctor whose name was recognized as a doctor in the world. And we come forward from that.
Wow. So it sounds like your book is a part history book, part medical kind of treatise, moving us forward, going from Imhotep to now. So I guess my question is, do you think that there has been any advances for Black people in medicine, or has it always kind of been this kind of at arm's length with the Western world, so to speak?
Well, let me first say that medicine is a moving situation. It's something that has occurred and has been playing out over the eons, going back even beyond 5,000 years, of course. But in that period of time, we've seen a number of developments. And to answer your question about what we've done now that might be important for people today to recognize, we learn from the past. If we don't revisit our past and look at what has happened before, we are destined to repeat the mistakes that were made back then. And there were a number of mistakes which have led to the current health care disparities that we talk about today. So we have to study history. We have to study our history. And we have to be the ones who study our history and report on it. Let me mention one other thing. This is the ninth book that I've written.
Okay.
Proud of that. The first book that I wrote was a book called The Textbook of Black-Related Diseases, which I wrote in 1974. That's 46 years ago.
Mm.
That book was the first one written by a Black physician on problems that are peculiar to African Americans, to Blacks in general, but especially to African Americans. Because before that time, it was assumed that one size fits all, that the description of disease that was done primarily about whites in our society was appropriate to apply to Blacks. We now know, based on that book that I wrote, that that is not true. We have a unique experience in medicine and in healthcare, and that story needs to be recognized by everyone in this country, and especially by the Black community. We need to know about the legacy of our medicine and our healthcare. If we don't learn about it, we're going to continue to be victimized by others who try to treat us in ways that don't apply to us.
Okay. So, in terms of the audience for this book, it sounds like you're saying this book is for everyone,
Yes,
Black,
it is.
white, or otherwise, or is it more geared towards just the general Black population on the planet?
Well, it's both.
Okay.
It's about Blacks, for Blacks, but to be studied by everyone who might have anything to do with Blacks in the medical and healthcare fields. For
Right.
instance, just to give you an example, most of the people in this country who are Black are not treated by Black doctors. Most are treated by white doctors or doctors of other ethnic persuasion. If we don't make sure that those doctors who treat us know about the peculiarities of our health care, about our illnesses and so forth, then they're not going to be able to treat us appropriately. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you're talking about just to give people some statistics that are watching. There's about 5% of the doctors that are in the country are Black doctors, and 3% of those are women, 2% of those are men. So when you're talking about a population that represents 13 to 14% of the American population, but only 5% of the doctors, it's safe to assume that most Black people are not being treated by Black doctors. Or, and then there's that other piece of culturally sensitive doctors, because there are some doctors of other ethnic groups that have learned about, the Black makeup and the differences in and how differences in diseases that affect us. And so I do want to give them some due, those that have learned cultural sensitivity, but for the most part, there's not enough Black doctors for this Black population. So this book is really designed to help people understand the historical how Black medicine has come forward to the 21st century.
That's exactly right, Ellis. And let me emphasize the fact that this book is designed to give the patients the information that they need to know what their diseases and their illnesses are all about. Let me simply state that as far as what we call health literacy is concerned, 80% of the population, and especially of the African American population, are illiterate in regards to medical knowledge. They don't know about anything about these diseases that victimize them. They don't know what hypertension is. They don't know what cancer is. Oh, sure, they know the terms, but they don't know enough about these diseases that are killing us.
Hmm.
And so this book is designed to teach those lessons to people so that they will know what it is that's affecting them. And also, it's designed on the other side for the doctors who will be treating our Black people. It's designed to give them the insights, the information, the all of the knowledge that they need to treat us appropriately. And that goes for doctors, no matter whether they're Black, white, or whatever other racial or ethnic persuasion. They have got to know, all doctors have got to know how to treat our people. If they don't do it, our people are not going to be appropriately treated, and the healthcare disparities that we know about will continue, and people will continue to die from maltreatment.
So it sounds like you're really advocating, because I don't want people to hear you or misinterpret what you're saying. It sounds like what you're saying is that all doctors and all Black people need to know about those illnesses that affect us, and then doctors that are going to be treating Black people, since we don't have enough Black doctors, need to understand the differences in their Black patients so they can better diagnose and treat them as a patient.
You got it. You nailed it. That's exactly right. And bear in mind what I said about the health literacy or health illiteracy in
Right.
this country that particularly affects our minority group patients. People don't know what it is that's killing them. They've got to know more about that. And that's especially true now that we're dealing with this terrible monster called COVID-19.
Yes, sir.
People have got to know, just to bring it into current perspective, not only that COVID-19 is a big killer, but that it's a disproportionate killer. It is not an equal opportunity killer, I
No.
guess you might say. Some people say, well, it kills, no, it's going to kill you no matter who you are or what you are. That's true, but it kills more of us than it kills of other people. And that's absolutely true. Just to give you some statistics, 40% of the people who are dying from COVID-19 nationwide are members of minority groups, and particularly Blacks and Latinx
Yes.
uh, groups. And that's a huge statistic when
Yes.
you consider the fact that we are not the majority minority, so to speak.
Right. So absolutely, and we recently had on Black Doctor, we had the president of the Hispanic American Medical Association, and she
Dr.
talked.
Rios, yes,
Yes, Dr. Elena Rios, and she really kind of talked about those disparities because America tends to the racial lens in America tends to be tuned on black and white,
yeah,
and haven't focused as much. So when she raised those concerns and really kind of talked about migrant workers, undocumented workers that are here in this country that are afraid to go get treated because they feel like they might get reported to ICE or deported, so they're not going to go get treated. If they become infected, the COVID is going to continue to spread amongst their population and eventually get back into the mainstream because they do so much work behind the scenes, working in hotels, restaurants, and whatnot, that they could continue to spread COVID into our mainstream population. So even with the vaccine, there's still going to be COVID because if migrant workers are afraid of being treated, then it's going to stay and it's going to continue to kill our Latinx brothers and sisters.
absolutely. And Dr. Rios is right on target in regards to what she's saying about the Latinx population, because they are victimized more than anybody else in this society
Yep,
from COVID-19. Uh, and so that has to be recognized.
absolutely. So I guess the next question is that do you feel like, with this year being probably the most unusual year of my lifetime, um, that everything has happened and transpired, especially culminating with the murder of George Floyd uh, in May early this year. Do you think that the climate of social justice, social change makes the uh, population more open to accept and read and really understand your book?
That's a nice way to put it. Let me put it more bluntly. Let me start out by saying something that I know is controversial, but I don't care because it's true. Black Lives Matter, okay? I'm
Yes, sir.
putting it out there. That's where I'm coming from.
Hmm.
Uh, and what that means is that we're not trying to say that we should forget about diseases and illnesses affecting everybody else. What we're talking about is the fact that we have been ignored for far too long,
Hmm.
uh, and we have been victimized far too much to let this go on. And you pointed out that I said that we have a racist medical system in our society.
Right.
I'm proud of being able to say that. I'm sorry that I have to say it,
Mm.
but it is absolutely true. And until we address systemic, institutional racism, uh, we're not going to get anywhere. And Black Lives Matter campaign is doing exactly that. It's addressing that, and we need to follow suit. We need to follow along and not let that fall out. You mentioned George Floyd. George
Hmm.
Floyd is a, uh, a, a lesson to us. I
Yeah.
think the COVID-19 has, if you will, unmasked a lot of the terrible injustices that exist in our society and have made us take a stark look at all
Hmm.
of these things and address them. If not for COVID-19, perhaps things would have gone along just as they have in the past, and people would continue to be victims of racism. Now we know, and now we know what the deal is, and we're able to address it more fully. And let me point out that it's a different paradigm this time. We've
Hmm.
had in situations where social injustice has been pointed out before, but
Hmm.
this is a different playing field now. If you take a look at the people who are out there protesting, these are not just blacks who are protesting,
Right.
as was the case before. We have young whites, we got people from the suburbs, we've got a what I call a healthy mixture, a diversity of concern and of involvement, and that's just what we need. Because what that means is that this society in general is starting to recognize that this cannot go on, that we're going to go down together if we don't stand up together against racism. Okay.
Absolutely. I have noticed that there's been some a polarization,
Yeah.
if you will, and you're right. I do agree that if George Floyd didn't happen, if COVID didn't happen, I think we would have kind of kept going along with our blinders on, with regards to how a great percentage of this population still feels about Black lives. And so I think the election of Donald Trump and subsequent events after his election kind of really opened our eyes to really kind of see how much work we still have to do with regards to those relations in this country. So, when I started I started working for Black Doctor and started doing some research about health disparities. We all know the big elephant in the room is the Tuskegee experiment from 1932. People don't realize that was from 1932, but it ran all the way until 1972, and was when I did some research on that, and I found that they it was a whistleblower that caused that particular study to be brought to the public eye because somebody that worked within the department brought it, said this is unethical. They reviewed it and said they were going to continue with the study, and he then leaked the information to a reporter, and it got to the Associated Press. And then after it got out to the public eye, then that's when they stopped that study. And so that was really kind of surprising to me to see that you had medical professionals and people that knew what they were doing, had somebody bring it to them, said it was unethical, and they still chose to continue to keep that study going on, where people had suffered unnecessarily. Some of them had mental illnesses, some of them died, some of them passed the illness on to their wives and their children, and so it's really kind of horrific, chapter in American history. How do we move forward from that as a people, as Black people? How do we move forward from the Tuskegee experiment? And how does the country, how does the medical profession atone for what happened so long ago?
Well, let me add some things to the very excellent description that you gave about the Tuskegee experiment, as it was called.
Mhm.
Uh, it ran for some 40 years, as you indicated, from 1932 to 1972.
Mhm.
It was stopped in 1972 because of the whistleblower
Mhm.
that you mentioned. It needs to be stressed that this experiment was being carried out by your U.S. government,
Mhm.
a project of the U.S. Public Health Service.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to recognize that. Don't bite your tongue when you say that. Make sure that it is addressed because the government was responsible for putting that study in motion
Yes.
and not Tuskegee Institute. It's a shame that that wonderful institute has to be saddled with the legacy of this horrible study. Probably the most, not probably, but the most discredited study in history
Right.
of the United States. And just to further describe it, remember that there were almost 400 Black men who
Yep.
were deceived to get into this study. And they were deceived with the promise that, don't worry, we're going to take care of you.
Yep.
Uh, and we're going to make sure that once you pass away, that you're going to your burial and so forth will be taken. The expenses will be taken care of by the government.
Right.
Governments take good care of you,
Right.
and your family will be taken care of, and all that sort of thing. So that's the basis on which these men agreed, and they were sharecroppers
Yep.
in Alabama, and they were led down the garden path. And also bear in mind that along the way, after that study was started, and the men weren't told that they were being given placebo rather than actual medicine to treat their syphilis,
Right.
that a cure for syphilis was discovered when penicillin was discovered
Yes.
uh, in the 1940s.
Yes, sir.
And they were not given any treatment. They were not given this curative treatment, which is certainly uh, an affront to the principles of public health.
Right.
And, uh, and it's an absolute shame. So there are a lot of other details that go along with that study. And by the way, this book of mine, Blacks in Medicine, details that entire study and all of the horrible detail that we've gone through about it and more. And that is placed in a chapter in the book, which I talk about that has to do with trust, which is something that everybody who goes to a doctor or is involved in any aspect of medical care as patient or as a provider or whatever has to deal with. That's the issue of trust. Do you trust your doctor? Does your doctor trust you? Does the doctor trust other doctors, etc.? Trust is a huge issue, and that certainly applies to the Tuskegee study because those men trusted these people who told them that it was going to be all right. They were going to be taken care of. They were going to be treated properly. All they needed to do was assign or put their X and get into this study, which was going to benefit mankind.
Right.
And you know the reason that they were doing the study. It was because they wanted to study. The government wanted to study the natural history of syphilis, and that meant that they wanted to follow these men to their death, and
Yep.
then autopsy them to find out what the real effects over a long period of time of syphilis were on the human body.
Right.
They were guinea pigs, no
Yeah.
question about it. And the last thing I want to say is that the Surgeon General at that time became the person who was leading the study, and he was profiled on the cover of Time magazine as a hero because of the fact that he was doing this great study that was going to shed light on one of the worst diseases that ever beset mankind.
Yes.
And so you get the picture of how we've been used and
Yeah,
how
I
we've been
was,
used. Book,
you
this
know,
book is is trying to tell you to what you need to know to set the record straight about how blacks have been treated in medicine. And so I think everybody needs to get a copy of it. And certainly every doctor in this country needs to have it. And absolutely every student of medicine. So I hope that your word goes out to all those folks so that they can avail themselves of this book. And you will tell them how they can get this book by going to
put it in,
springer.com.
put it in the comment section of how they can get the book. So I know there's been a lot of comments since then, so I'll put it in there again, and we'll talk about it as we get towards the end of our discussion. So yeah, absolutely. So I do want to give the full context of it, if there was anything positive that came out of the Tuskegee study, is that that's when we started having informed consent being mandated as part of participation in clinical studies from that point on, government run clinical studies from that point as a result of the Tuskegee experiment. And that basically informed consent means they have to tell you what they're going to do, and you have to sign the saying that you understand what they're going to do, and that you can stop participation at any point in time. And they also instituted institutional IRBs, which is institutional review boards, where they have an independent group review all aspects of a clinical trial or a study as a result. So those things are the result of what happened in the Tuskegee experiment. It does not diminish what happened. But that is what happened as a result of people finding out about what happened with the Tuskegee study, Tuskegee experiment. So moving forward to COVID, and so that's kind of been the big kind of conversation when we're talking about these clinical trials that have been surrounding the COVID vaccine development. And a lot of Black Americans have been pushing back and saying no, because they don't want to participate in another Tuskegee type experiment. What do you say to those people that to give them some sort of ease, or could they have any ease with regards to a replication of the Tuskegee experiment?
Well, the first thing that I want to say is that I think as medical professionals, we have to take a responsibility to make certain that people in general get the proper information to make their own decision as to whether they want to take the vaccine. That's a personal decision, but it should be guided by medical science and by good medical advice. And
Mhm.
so where this starts is with the doctors and the scientists who are in charge of our treatment, so to
Mhm.
speak. They have to advise patients. Patients, as I said, don't have the kind of uh, medical or healthcare information that they need to make informed decisions. So we
Mhm.
have to give it to them, and in order to give them the proper decisions, uh, we have to be trained properly, and we have to do our research, our due diligence. And many doctors have not done that.
Right.
Uh, the other thing is that uh, I keep going back to this issue of trust. We got to make sure that the message is being given by the right messengers. And that's not always the case in this COVID-19 scenario. Uh,
Mhm.
we don't have enough of the right messengers putting the correct message out there. Let me tell you who the correct messengers are. First of all, you've heard a lot on CNN and other programs and so forth from a number of medical authorities. Uh, and I would say that for the most part, they're right on. They're okay. Certainly, Dr. Fauci and all of his associates are delivering the right message, but they're putting information out there which has to be further implemented and inculcated into our people by other messengers. Who are those other messengers? Those people need to be, for instance, our pastors in our churches.
Mm.
Folks in churches, but our pastors are believable, and yet they need to be educated about what the right deal is. They need to then turn to their parishioners and say, "You need to take this vaccine. This is going to be something that is good for you," and so forth. The other thing is that people need to use what we call a bit of mother wit. Now, we got a lot of that in our race. Black people have been able to survive for years because they learned things from their mothers, which have allowed them to survive, allowed all of us to survive. And that's called mother wit. And common sense is another term that's used.
Yeah.
So the common sense take on this is the following. If you have two scenarios, one which has to do with your taking the vaccine and possibly suffering some side effects and possibly even death from taking the vaccine. And the other scenario is not taking the vaccine and exposing yourself to COVID 19 in an unprotected fashion. What does your mother would tell you that you should decide? Okay?
Yeah.
That's putting things very simply. And that's what people need to hear.
Yeah.
They don't need to hear all the gobbledygook about COVID 19 and the spike protein and uh, all of the different possible variants that may be coming at us and so forth and so on, and what might have been placed into the vaccine and whether, all of the questions that are going around. It's okay for them to ask that, but at the end of the day, they need to understand that they need to take this vaccine. It is a whole lot safer and a better deal health wise for people than the alternative, which is facing COVID 19 and saying, okay, I'm going to see what happens. Come get me. And I'll whether I can survive. That's not a smart decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I tell you, I
And
was,
if people out there that are listening to this get the message. You don't have to have all of the information about how COVID 19 works and how the vaccines are different and so forth. What you need to do is to use your mother wit, your common sense. Okay?
I love
That's
that
yeah.
mother. I think, that's one of the things because I actually was the one that produced the behind the scenes the when we had Dr. Fauci here on Black Doctor, and one of the things that we talk about daily is really trying to give people the information that they need. For the people that want to take the vaccine, we're trying to give them the most information that they can need, and then we're also focusing on telling them how they can get it, because when we're talking about health disparities, if you've got a percentage of black people that say they want to get the vaccine, we need to make sure that they can get it and not get it later on down the line, or get what's left after everybody else has had their take of the vaccine. We need to be part of the initial group that are out there getting the vaccine if we so choose to take it. So that's it. That's kind of been our charge. We're not telling people to take it or not to take it. We're just saying get the information so you can make an informed decision and not just make a decision based on emotion and snap judgment. So I appreciate you saying that mother wit. I love that. I'm going to use that going forward. So um, one of the things that we have had here on Black Doctor multiple times is we've had several Black doctors come through, and I think that that's really the role that we play as a media platform, is to bring, because there's so few Black doctors and there's so few accomplished Black doctors in the nation, that we try to bring them here to amplify their voice. And that's why we're talking to you, so you can we can amplify your voice to get the word out about your book, so people can learn about your book, learn about our Black medical history. What other roles do you think that Black
Well,
doctors
before
could?
you go on,
Sure.
I want to emphasize that BlackDoctor.org is the megaphone that we need to be able to project our voice further. Because you're absolutely right. We don't have enough clout and certainly not enough numbers to be able to get to the point of getting our voice amplified so that people can hear this message that needs to be delivered. And you guys are doing an incredible job. And I hope that everybody out there will try to get the contact exponentially increased to BlackDoctor.org. So that might sound like a commercial for you, but it's a well-deserved and a well-earned commercial.
Well, thank you for that. We're going to clip that portion and play it on our site. But that's really been our charge, and our charge really here has been to help eradicate disparities in treatment and in medicine, and we're trying to eliminate the life expectancy gap. Those are two of our biggest charges, and the way we can do that is by giving people good information and getting Black doctors a platform to stand out and speak out. And so, what we're talking about here with you tonight, and if you're just joining us, we're talking to Dr. Richard Allen Williams about his book, Black in Medicine. He goes through 5,000 years of Black history in medicine with this book. So please check it out. I put it again, how you can get the book as well as the discount code in the chat room. So if you're joining us, just check out the chat room, look for the Black Doctor post, and you can get the book there along with the discount code and buy it for yourself and share it with your friends and family, especially during this holiday season, because we have to know how our bodies work. The only way we can heal thyself, as they said back in the older times, they say heal thyself. You can't heal thyself if you don't know how your body works. And so therefore we have to learn how our body works. And Dr. Williams here has done a masterful job in putting it into one book so we can learn about our differences. So let's talk about one of those differences. Diabetes, aka the sugar, has been a big kind of killer of Black people for a long time. Why do you think it's so prominent in our community?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the statistics. Um, and I'm full of statistics. I've collected all my life.
Yes, sir.
60 years. You can imagine that I'm crammed full in this head of all the figures that we need to be able to say whatever it is that we want to put forth. So, as far as diabetes is concerned, diabetes is, as far as its seriousness is concerned, it is ranked as the uh, fifth or sixth greatest killer of Americans. That's of Americans in general.
Mm,
Just to give you an idea of how things are different, for Black people, it ranks number 3 or number 4. So it's
okay.
higher. It's more important. And to cut further to the chase, uh, Black people have a 2.5 times to 3 times higher incidence of diabetes and a higher death rate. And so it's an important thing. We also see that diabetes mellitus, which we sometimes call sugar
Hmm.
in common parlance, is something that's been around for a long time
Hmm.
and it's studied for a long time. There have been some miracle drugs such as insulin that have been developed, and it's a long, wonderful story about that, which we can't tell here,
Yeah,
but
right.
benefited people in general. And that's a treatment that is used, has been used for a long period of time, but mostly in diabetics who have what we call type 1.
Hmm.
Type 2 diabetes, or what we used to call mature onset diabetes, is now being seen in Black people, especially, who are 12, 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
So adult diabetes is no longer the proper term to use. So anyway, that's one of the most important diseases that we have to deal with. And let me tell you a little bit more about it. We have found that the mechanisms, ways that these diseases kill you is important for us to study. Because if we find out how a disease kills you, we can then study how to keep you from being killed by it.
Yep.
Okay, so if that makes sense to you, it makes further sense to see what other diseases and what we call comorbidities,
Mhm.
use fancy language, may be associated with diabetes. And it turns out that diabetes is associated with and is now considered part of the most important killer of all in our society, and that's heart disease. I'm
Okay.
a cardiologist by trade, and
Okay.
so I can talk all day and all night long about heart disease, and not even mention diabetes, but I would be not doing my proper due diligence if I didn't bring diabetes in, because 70% of the people who have diabetes or sugar will die from a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
That's important to keep in mind. People don't realize that when they have the sugar, they're not dealing just with that sugar that's in their system. They're dealing with the things like the cholesterol that is in their heart arteries or their coronary arteries, which is really what's going to bring them down. And so that
Mm.
has to be addressed. And so uh, we say in cardiology that in diabetes, the coronary arteries are really the heart of the matter.
Absolutely. Well, that is a unique perspective. I didn't even think about that. I didn't even know that statistic. So that I think that's really good. That it's like something that people need to hear is that because when you hear about diabetes, you hear about blindness and amputation and all of those other ailments that could lead to death, but you never really hear about that death is from a heart attack or
Right.
and so that's good to know. So I know we're talking about ailments and all that stuff. How can people prevent these things from happening? Is it just diet? Is it diet and exercise? Is it diet, exercise, and medicine? How can Black people prevent some of these diseases that are really, hurting our population?
Go to the doctor. You got to go to the doctor on a regular basis, which is something that our people don't do enough of.
Okay.
Now, we've depended a lot on home remedies,
Right.
and I'm not going to talk against other things that, such as herbs and some of the naturopathic treatments that might be used, and all those things are good in of themselves, but not as single treatments. They are good as adjuncts or additions to regular treatment that the doctor, the allopathic doctor, can give you. So
Mm.
bear that in mind, folks. I'm not speaking against you using herbs or supplements or whatever it is. Those things can help, but they are only adjuncts to allopathic regular medical treatment, which you must have for conditions such as diabetes. You are not going to be able to treat diabetes in most cases without having the medications, the wonderful medications that have been developed to treat that condition. So if you're asking what people can do if they have, for instance, diabetes, to get better or to avoid being in that 70% group that's going to have a heart attack, first
Yeah.
go to the doctor and make sure that the doctor lays out the prescription for your treatment, and make sure you take that medication that he or she prescribes for you. And I'm very mindful of the fact that, get this, Ellis,
Yeah.
50% of the prescriptions that are written by doctors for patients are tossed in the trash. I'll say it again. Half of the medications that I will prescribe for somebody are never going to be filled at the pharmacy. Now, there are different reasons for that. People may
Right.
not be able to afford that medicine, or they may disagree. They may say, "Oh, I don't think that doctor knows what he's talking about. I'm going to take this naturopathic medicine that whomever has prescribed, and I think that I might be able to do better and not have all the side effects that I heard that maybe metformin may cause me, or
Right.
Nuvia or whatever other diabetes medicines that there are. But you might think that you're right, but if you're not careful, you're gonna be dead wrong, with the emphasis on the dead.
And then there's that. So yeah, that's incredible. 50%. So I'm surprised that farmers. Maybe that's why the pharmaceutical medications are so high, because they're not selling enough. Because 50% of them are being
Yeah.
taught. They got to make their money on the other 50% that are being filled. So. Uh, Again, if you are just joining us, we are talking to Dr. Richard Allen Williams about his book, Blacks in Medicine. Dr. Williams, you want to show the book again so people can see it when they search for it on the internet? It's called Blacks in Medicine by Richard Allen Williams. It is not his first book. This is not his first rodeo. And so this book chronicles 5,000 years of Blacks in medicine, going all the way back to Imhotep in Africa, and bringing us forward. And all of there is a chapter, there's a portion, and it's really about trust and how we have to find that trust with our medical provider, whether it's Black or some other ethnic group. We've got to find the trust, and that trust is a two-way street. Is you have to trust your doctor has to trust you, and your doctor has to have, if it's not a Black doctor, they have to have culturally relevant and sensitive information in order to be able to effectively treat you as a Black American or a Black person in the world. And so really that's what we're driving for. That is what we're striving for. And that's what the purpose of this book is, if I'm paraphrasing here for you, Dr. Williams.
No, you paraphrased it in excellent fashion.
Well, thank you. So as we're wrapping up, what are the last things, what are the things that you want people to know about their health and about your book?
Well, first of all, every individual is a steward of his or her own health. God gave you this marvelous temple that we call our bodies, and he or she has said, I am going to entrust you to take care of your temple. And part of that has to do with forming a partnership with your doctor.
Mhm.
And as partners, you will make sure that you take excellent care of yourself. That's the way it should work. You should create a partnership with your doctor, and your doctor ought to consider that you are a partner with him or her in your treatment. And so, to answer your question, what can we do to improve our health and to guarantee that we're going to be able to go on and we're going to get beyond this COVID-19 crisis and so forth? You need to look more inside of yourself, and you are a great resource within yourself, but you've got to use that resource properly. What that means is that you've got a great mind, you've got the ability to analyze the situation for your own benefit, and in that analysis, you've got to use that mother wit that I told you about, common sense,
Yes, sir.
make the appropriate decisions. I can't go through every single thing that's in this book and tell you what it outlines for you about how you need to talk or learn about some of these exotic diseases. And I'll just give you one example of uh, of what is out there that's lurking if you're not careful, that might get you if you don't do the right thing. And that one example is a relatively new disease of the heart that has appeared on the horizon. Now, don't worry about memorizing the term, but it's called ATTR cardiac amyloidosis. That's a form of heart failure, which affects something like 4% of the Black population in the United States. And if you do the math, you'll realize that that comes out to about 1.6 million people who
Ooh,
have this disease that's lurking within them and they don't know about it. And it's a deadly disease. It will kill you unless you get appropriate treatment. Before you get to treatment, you've got to be diagnosed. And
yeah.
before you get diagnosed, You've got to be able to go to a doctor who knows anything about this. I'll guarantee you that 90% of the doctors in the United States right now do not know about this disease because of the fact that they're not attuned to diseases that particularly affect Black people.
Wow.
Okay. And so if that doesn't bring it home to you, I don't know what will.
Well,
Uh,
I've never heard of that, so I need to make sure. So, is it going to be? How do they catch it? How does a doctor catch it?
Well, the doctor catches it by being able to, first of all, uh, look for the clues to this disease. I'm not going to go into details about
Right.
what those are on the show, but let me simply say that the doctor that the patient selects is important and needs to be able to know that this disease exists and that patient, that Black patient sitting in front of him, may have uh, has a propensity to getting this disease. In order for him to suspect that, he has to have been educated in the proper manner. That is, he's got to have read this book,
Right.
and he has to have been educated appropriately at his medical school, which is not able to do that for the most part. Most of the 140 medical schools in this country don't know what I've just told you
Right.
because of the fact that they have not had consideration for the unique medical experience that Blacks have in healthcare. And so, uh, what it comes down to is the patients themselves have to have a high index of suspicion. When they go to the doctor, they need to challenge the doctor. Doctor, what's wrong with me? Is it possible that I might have something wrong with my heart that is unique to me as a Black person? Uh, could you tell me what those things might be? Am I susceptible, so to speak, to certain diseases and conditions that maybe other people may not? And what, don't be afraid. Ask the doctor what he or she has learned about these conditions, which the patient may already know. And that's a good thing. You're not being uh, disrespectful of the doctor's knowledge and so forth if you ask him or her those questions. And you should do that. And that's a part of taking care of things yourself, of being responsible for your own medical care.
Absolutely. Well, you could only be your own best self advocate, and we talk about that on a great many times here on this show. And so, I think everyone should be their own best self advocate. And if you have somebody in your life that needs an advocate, you can be their advocate as well. If you have aging parents or children, then you need to be their advocate as well. Write down those questions. Come to Black Doctor. Go to the website. Learn about it because the way we present diseases on our site is that we talk about it from a Black perspective. And so go there, learn about the disease, write down your questions, go to your doctor and see if it's in alignment with what you have learned, either from the professionals that we have on here or reading what we have on our site, and make sure that it's in alignment so you can be your own best self advocate. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Williams, for joining us this evening. The book again is Blacks in Medicine. Please, I put the link there again in the chat room. This is the third time. It's comment section, and it's a discount code. Please go get that book, read it, read it for your own edification, read it so your friends and your family share that book. Get that book out there. Give it as a gift to somebody so they can learn about the health. They can learn about the history of health in Black people and how Blacks have been affected by medicine in positive and negative way, but more on the negative side in terms of health, how we got to the point of healthcare disparities in 2020. This book chronicles 5,000 years of how we got to this point today. So, Dr. Williams, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for coming and joining us tonight. Please enjoy your holiday season. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ellis, for the opportunity. And I just want to wish all of the people who have heard this program the best holiday season. And we will get beyond this COVID 19. take the vaccine. Don't let anybody tell you not to do that. That's my final word to you.
Amen to that. Good night, everybody.